Hey, everybody, indulge me, if you will, for a few minutes because I want to have a heavy metal shootout. Two records are going to go in, only one's going to come out. The question being, which one is the heaviest? And it's going to seem obvious to you, but maybe it isn't. So let's get to it. The first thing I have to do is explain to you, fittingly, I have to explain to you who Gun is, in case you don't know. You might know. If you don't, I'm about to fill you in. Gun was a band formed in 1967 by two brothers, Paul and Adrian Gervitz. They're a British heavy psych band. And in 1968, year after they formed, they released their first album. And it was this one. It's self-titled. It's just called Gun. And a lot of people know this record because of the cover. All the screaming demons on there. Very, very cool cover. And interestingly, the first cover done by Roger Dean, who later went on to make covers for a lot of progressive bands in the 70s and 80s, Asia, Yes, bands like that. A lot of their iconic covers was created by this guy, but this was his first gig, and he really smashed it. It's a really killer cover. And the other thing that's notable about this record is right here, the first song on the first side, which was also the single, Race with the Devil, because it is, for all intents and purposes, a new wave of British heavy metal song. You could put it in between Angel Witch and Diamond Head, you would not notice the difference. But of course, it was created in 1968. It is a bit of a proto-metal classic, and it has been covered by British heavy metal bands like Judas Priest and Girl School. And even just in the last few years, Japan sludge doom masters Church of Misery. So the song really got around. It is foundational for proto-metal. Doesn't get the accolades that a lot of other bands do. You know, nobody mentions Gun when they're mentioning Sir Lord Baltimore or Bang or Atomic Rooster or Budgie, but they were there. They were creating it. They had feet on the ground. They were in the trenches. They were creating heavy music as it was just becoming a concept. Now, what happened to Gun after that? Well, they released one more record, which I'm going to talk about. After that, the Gun broke up in 1970. It had some more bands that were kind of the same sort of setup. There was Three Man Army. There was the Baker Gurvitz Army, which they formed with Ginger Baker after he left Cream. And of course, they also did two records with the drummer for Moody Blues, whose name I don't recall at the moment. After that, in the 80s, they became songwriters for hire. And they both ended up being very, very successful at it. They wrote songs, collectively, they wrote songs for everybody from REO Speedwagon to the Fat Boys. So if you were listening to the radio in the 80s, quite possibly you were listening to Gurvitz Brothers compositions at some point. So that's the story of Gun. And now, let's talk about the other band in this rumble. Destruction. You can tell this is a reissue. It's very glossy, so it's causing some problems with glare, but this is Sentence of Death, which originally came out in 1984. It is Destruction's first commercially available piece of music. They had in a demo that went around in the tape trading community before that, but Destruction was the first thing most people, including me, heard from them. And of course, it's a classic of, manic, teenage, punk-fueled energy. There is a rawness to the entire thing that to some ears might be a little abrasive, but for teenagers in the 80s, like I was, it was manna from heaven. And I played that one to death. Now, of course, Destruction went from strength to strength after that, eventually becoming one of the pillars of German thrash metal, along with Sodom Creator and Tankard. But of course, this was their earliest days when they were still formulating what it was. And, they are often lumped in, this record in particular is lumped in with the first wave of black metal because it's satanic and it's thrashy and it's raw. I think if it came out today, it would be more accurately labeled black thrash because of the satanic lyrics and the thrashy songs. But, the band's still doing great. I saw them a couple years ago. The last record was killer. So that's Destruction. Now, what do they have in common? Well, the record covers are similar. These guys, and then you got these guys, right? Looks very similar to me. So, got me to thinking, well, what's the heavier record? Now, on the surface, obviously, Destruction is heavier because it's thrash metal. And pretty brutal thrash metal at that. But Gunsight, let us not forget, released this record in 1969, which was the year I was born. And you can look at me and tell how long ago that really was. And to be as heavy as this record is in 1969 is very remarkable. Now, no bands that were playing this burgeoning style of heavy music in 68 or 69 made records that were heavy all the way through. It just wasn't a thought yet until Black Sabbath did it. So there was always like lighter stuff added in to these records. And it's that way with Gunsight. But I would say that the heavy songs in it are quite remarkable. Now, what do we got here? The A side has a song called Head in the Clouds. It's the first song. And it is basically a psychedelic rock song, but there is a battering guitar in the background that becomes more prominent as it goes on, and then it just becomes a total heavy jammer. Killer. There's also a song right afterwards called Drown Yourself in the River. Now, that is a heavy sentiment, and it's a heavy song. Again, starts out light, builds, it gets more intense as we go along. Perhaps the heaviest song on the record closes the first side, and it's called Dreams and Screams, and it sounds exactly like you would want it to. It is as metal as 1969 could get, and it's killer. The B-side is less heavy, but I will say two things about it. One, the opener, Situation Vacant, which is about not having a job, is a definite precursor, thematically, at the very least, of, punk rock a few years later. And the last song, just an all-out, top-down rocker, is called Long Hair Wild Man, which I appreciate because, weren't we all? I sure was. I bet you were too at some point. So that's what Gunsight's all about. So I don't know. I've been listening to the two of them back to back and just kind of figuring out, for me, what's the heavier record? And I think in context, being that heavy metal as a concept was just coming into fruition, and for what this band did with that brand new sound, I'm going to have to go with Gunsight. But also keep in mind that Destruction gave us so much more as time went on. They released a lot of incredible records. Gunsight was the last thing we ever heard from Gun, the last thing we will ever hear from Gun. And so for that reason, I'm picking Gunsight. I could be wrong. Let me know if I am. We'll do another one of these soon. See you.